Since the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, media has held a unique place in human society. It informs us, connects us, and holds those in power accountable. From the pamphlets of the American Revolution to the televised moments that shaped modern history, the media has been our window to the world. But what happens when that window is smudged, when the lens of truth is distorted by power, greed, or agenda? Throughout history, the media has been both a beacon of truth and a weapon of manipulation. Its power to shape public opinion, for better or worse, is unparalleled. The media is often referred to as the Fourth Estate, a pillar of democracy tasked with holding governments, corporations, and institutions accountable. Yet, this immense power also makes it susceptible to corruption. When those controlling the flow of information prioritize profit ideology or political gain over truth, the consequences can be catastrophic. The seeds of media manipulation were planted long ago. In the late 19th century, publishers like William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer realized the immense profitability of sensationalism. Known as yellow journalism, their style of reporting prioritized drama over facts, fueling public outrage and even stoking wars. The Spanish-American War of 1898 was perhaps the first major conflict influenced by media corruption, with headlines like "Remember the Maine." Despite no definitive evidence of Spanish involvement, Hearst and Pulitzer proved that the press could steer public opinion and even alter the course of history. Throughout the 20th century, the media's role evolved. At its best, it served as a watchdog, exposing corruption and challenging oppressive power. Edward R. Murrow took on Senator McCarthy's fearmongering. Walter Cronkite's reporting helped shift public opinion on the Vietnam War. These moments reaffirmed the potential of a free and ethical press. But as the influence of media grew, so did the forces that sought to control it. The late 20th century saw the consolidation of media into fewer and fewer hands. Corporations like News Corp, led by Rupert Murdoch, began shaping narratives to align with their financial and ideological interests. This concentration of power created echo chambers, where diverse perspectives were drowned out by carefully curated messages. The media, once the voice of the people, increasingly became the mouthpiece of its owners. And so, we are left with a question that has haunted the media since its inception. How can the press remain a pillar of truth when so many forces, political, corporate, technological, seek to corrupt it? Is it still possible for media to serve the public good in an age dominated by profit, speed, and polarization? This is the story of how media, once a noble institution, has been compromised by greed, power, and deception, and the brave individuals who fight to restore its integrity. From yellow journalism to digital disinformation, from the birth of the printing press to the rise of social media, we'll explore how media corruption has shaped and continues to shape our world. The press has always been a cornerstone of democracy, wielding immense influence over public opinion. In the late 19th century, the rise of modern newspapers like the New York World and the New York Journal marked a turning point. But this newfound power came with a darker side, one that prioritized sensationalism over truth. Joseph Pulitzer of the New York World and William Randolph Hearst of the New York Journal were pioneers in what became known as yellow journalism. Their newspapers turned news into a spectacle, designed not to inform, but to provoke. Bold headlines, lurid illustrations, and sensationalist stories became the order of the day. In 1898, their sensationalism played a pivotal role in stoking public anger over the explosion of the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Without evidence, both papers pointed the finger at Spain, creating a groundswell of support for the Spanish-American War. Their stories showed that the media could not only report history, but also create it. The lessons of yellow journalism weren't lost on governments. By World War I, propaganda became a tool of the state. Both the British Ministry of Information and the U.S. Committee on Public Information, led by George Creel, weaponized the press to rally public support and demonize the enemy. The U.S. Committee on Public Information, often called the Creel Committee, was tasked with selling the war to a skeptical American public. Through posters, newsreels, and staged photographs, they painted an idealized image of the war effort, one that omitted its harsh realities. But propaganda often blurred the line between truth and deception. By suppressing critical voices and amplifying state-approved narratives, it created a sanitized version of reality that left the public unprepared for the true cost of war. Yellow journalism and wartime propaganda laid the foundation for media manipulation. The goals shifted from informing to influencing, from truth-telling to profit-making and narrative control. These early examples reveal the media's vulnerability to corruption, a vulnerability that persists today. The human cost of media corruption is immeasurable. Sensationalism and propaganda may have filled coffers and rallied troops, but they also cost lives. This wasn't just a betrayal of journalistic ethics. It was a betrayal of the public trust. From the birth of yellow journalism to the calculated propaganda of World War I, these early examples show how easily the media can be co-opted. But they also offer lessons. To understand the corruption of today's media, we must first examine its roots and recognize that the fight for truth is as old as the press itself. Corruption in media didn't end with the printing press or propaganda posters. It evolved, adapting to new technologies and exploiting new vulnerabilities. As we move forward, we'll see how these early practices laid the groundwork for a system where power and profit often eclipse truth. But the question remains, how can we hold the media accountable in a world that demands both speed and accuracy? In the early days of journalism, media outlets were largely independent, each striving to serve its local community or audience. But by the late 20th century, the media landscape began to change. Small, independent outlets were swallowed up by larger corporations. The news, once a diverse chorus of voices, was becoming a monologue controlled by a select few. Few figures embody the shift in media ownership more than Rupert Murdoch and Ted Turner. Murdoch, the founder of News Corp, built an empire spanning newspapers, television networks, and film studios. Under his leadership, outlets like Fox News became powerful tools for shaping political discourse, often leaning heavily toward conservative viewpoints. Murdoch's approach was clear: control the narrative by controlling the outlets. His empire not only reported the news, but influenced elections, policies, and public opinion on a massive scale. Ted Turner, on the other hand, revolutionized how news was delivered. CNN's 24-hour news cycle changed the game, but it also set a precedent. The need to constantly fill airtime led to a shift, from thoughtful reporting to sensationalism, from facts to speculation. The relationship between corporate interests and media influence was perhaps most evident in the mid-20th century. Big Tobacco, with its massive advertising budgets, became one of the media's largest clients. Networks and newspapers faced a dilemma: report the truth about smoking's dangers or risk losing lucrative ad revenue. The media often chose profits over public health. For years, networks aired cigarette ads while suppressing stories about their health risks. The result? A public kept in the dark, with devastating consequences. Today we see a similar dynamic with Big Pharma. Networks rely heavily on pharmaceutical advertising dollars, raising questions about their willingness to critique the very companies that fund them. How can the media hold these corporations accountable when their survival depends on their money? The reliance on advertising revenue has shaped media priorities for decades. Stories that attract viewers, and by extension advertisers, are given precedence, often at the expense of more critical but less sensational issues. Beyond tobacco and pharmaceuticals, other industries have learned to manipulate media narratives. Fossil fuel companies, for example, funded disinformation campaigns to sow doubt about climate change. In the alternative, mainstream media has promoted climate change to further political agendas and corporate interests. The mainstream media lacks the integrity and constitutional fortitude to report the truth when lies and manipulation pay so much better. Media outlets, either complicit or underfunded, often gave these narratives undue legitimacy. When newsrooms lack the resources or courage to investigate these industries, the truth becomes a casualty. It's a story as old as media itself, the powerful using their influence to shape public perception. The consolidation of media ownership has left us with fewer voices and less accountability. Today, just a handful of corporations control the vast majority of what we read, watch, and hear. This concentration of power stifles diversity and amplifies bias, leaving the public with an increasingly narrow view of the world. Despite these challenges, the fight for independent journalism continues. In an age of media conglomerates, the voices that challenge the status quo are more important than ever. They remind us of what journalism was meant to be, a watchdog for the people, not a lapdog for power. As we look at the intersection of media and politics, the stakes become even higher. From the Red Scare to the Iraq War, the media's role in shaping history and distorting it becomes impossible to ignore. Media wields immense power, not just to inform, but to influence. Over the decades, this power has been both weaponized and compromised, often in service of political agendas. From the Red Scare of the 1950s to the Iraq War, the media has not only reported history, but shaped it. How did the watchdog become complicit, and what were the consequences? In 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy launched what would become one of the darkest chapters in American media history. Claiming that communists had infiltrated the government, McCarthy leveraged the media to spread fear and paranoia, effectively turning the press into his loudspeaker. The result? A nationwide witch hunt that destroyed careers and lives. Many media outlets uncritically amplified McCarthy's baseless accusations, prioritizing sensationalism over scrutiny. The fear of being labeled unpatriotic silenced dissenting voices, allowing McCarthy's influence to grow unchecked. The Fourth Estate, meant to act as a watchdog, instead became a willing accomplice. But not all journalists remained silent. Edward R. Murrow of CBS took a stand. His broadcasts exposed McCarthy's tactics, challenging the media's complicity and demonstrating the power of journalism done right. Murrow reminded the nation of the press's duty to hold power accountable, even in the face of public fear. Fast forward to 2003. The United States, reeling from the 9/11 attacks, turned its sights on Iraq. The Bush administration claimed Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs, and posed an imminent threat. The media, instead of questioning these claims, largely echoed them. Major outlets like CNN and Fox News amplified government narratives with little skepticism. The New York Times, through reporters like Judith Miller, published stories based on dubious sources, lending credibility to the administration's case for war. This failure to challenge authority had devastating consequences. As the invasion began, media coverage often resembled a spectacle. Networks focused on the military's firepower, sidestepping the human toll and the dubious justification for the conflict. It wasn't until years later that the absence of WMDs was confirmed, exposing the media's role in enabling the war. The Iraq War revealed the vulnerability of the media to political pressure. Fear of losing access, combined with the drive for ratings, eroded journalistic independence. The consequences were stark. Public trust in the press declined, and the media's credibility was irreparably damaged. Partisan media further deepened divisions. Outlets aligned with political ideologies offered drastically different narratives, leaving the public confused and divided. This polarization continues to shape how news is consumed and trusted today. The stories of McCarthyism and the Iraq War are reminders of the media's power and its responsibility. When journalism fails to question authority, the cost is borne by the public. But when journalists uphold their duty, they become a force for truth, challenging power and protecting democracy. In the digital age, the media's challenges have only multiplied. The rise of social media, clickbait, and algorithms has created a new battlefield for truth. As we delve into this era, the stakes for journalism and democracy are higher than ever. At the dawn of the 21st century, the Internet revolutionized how we communicate, connect, and consume information. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube offered unprecedented access to global news and personal expression. But this technological marvel soon revealed a darker side, one that would change the nature of media forever. Social media platforms, originally designed to connect us, have become fertile ground for misinformation. During the 2016 U.S. presidential election, fake news stories garnered more engagement than real journalism. A single false story could reach millions in hours, shaping opinions before the truth could catch up. At the heart of this crisis lies the algorithm. Platforms like Facebook and YouTube prioritize content that drives engagement, likes, shares, and clicks. Unfortunately, the most engaging content is often the most sensational, divisive, or outright false. These algorithms are not designed for truth. They're designed for profit. The consequences of misinformation are not confined to cyberspace. False narratives fueled movements like Pizzagate and even contributed to the Capitol insurrection. Social media turned conspiracies into communities, creating echo chambers where lies became reality. As traditional media struggled to adapt to the digital age, they found themselves competing with newer, faster, and often less credible outlets. Clickbait headlines became the norm, with platforms like BuzzFeed and legacy outlets alike embracing sensationalism to drive traffic. The need for clicks and ad revenue led to a shift in priorities. Deep investigative reporting took a backseat to shallow, clickable content. Even once reputable outlets adapted to the metrics-driven landscape, sacrificing quality for quantity. In response to the flood of misinformation, tech giants like Facebook, Google, and Twitter introduced content moderation policies. These efforts, while necessary, have sparked controversies. Critics argue that these measures sometimes suppress dissenting voices and independent journalism, blurring the line between moderation and censorship. Content creators, particularly those in independent media, often bear the brunt of these policies. Many have seen their income vanish overnight due to unclear or unevenly applied guidelines. This has raised questions about who gets to decide what constitutes acceptable speech, and whether these decisions are influenced by political or corporate interests. In the digital age, the line between news and entertainment has blurred. Truth has become a commodity, valued not for its accuracy, but for its ability to generate clicks and revenue. This shift has eroded public trust in media and left society vulnerable to manipulation. Algorithms don't just amplify sensationalism, they also reinforce polarization. By curating content based on past engagement, they create echo chambers where users are exposed only to viewpoints they already agree with. This deepens divides and undermines the possibility of a shared reality. The digital age has transformed media into a battleground for truth, where misinformation, sensationalism, and censorship vie for dominance. As journalism grapples with these challenges, the stakes for democracy couldn't be higher. An uninformed public is an unempowered public. In the face of these challenges, some continue to fight for accountability and transparency. From whistleblowers to independent journalists, their work reminds us that the media can still be a force for good. As we move forward, the question remains, how do we restore integrity to the Fourth Estate? For centuries, media has shaped the course of history, sometimes elevating humanity and at other times betraying it. The consequences of unchecked media corruption are etched in the scars of wars, public health crises, and fractured democracies. But amid these challenges, individuals and organizations have emerged, fighting to reclaim journalism's integrity. In 2006, Julian Assange founded WikiLeaks, a platform that exposed government and corporate secrets on an unprecedented scale. Leaks like Collateral Murder revealed the harsh realities of war, challenging sanitized narratives pushed by mainstream outlets. But the transparency came at a cost. Assange became a polarizing figure, hailed as a hero by some and a traitor by others. 7 years later, Edward Snowden, a former NSA contractor, unveiled the extent of government surveillance programs. Working with journalists like Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras, Snowden showed how global communications were being monitored, raising critical questions about privacy, security, and the role of the press in exposing overreach. Whistleblowers often pay a steep price for their courage, facing exile, imprisonment, or worse. Yet their revelations have ignited global conversations about accountability, forcing governments and corporations to confront uncomfortable truths. Founded in 2007, ProPublica operates as a nonprofit newsroom, producing investigative journalism that prioritizes public interest over profit. Their reporting has led to policy changes and won Pulitzer Prizes, proving that ethical journalism can thrive outside traditional models. The Intercept, co-founded by Glenn Greenwald, has become a beacon for independent journalism. By challenging both political and corporate narratives, it provides a platform for stories often ignored by mainstream outlets. Fact-checking organizations like PolitiFact and Snopes have emerged as frontline defenders against misinformation. By scrutinizing claims and providing transparent evaluations, they empower the public to separate fact from fiction. Media literacy education equips individuals with the tools to critically analyze information, recognize bias, and resist manipulation. Programs in schools and communities aim to cultivate informed consumers who can hold media accountable. Nonprofit and crowd-funded journalism offers a path forward, free from the pressures of advertisers and corporate ownership. These models prioritize public interest, fostering reporting that serves democracy rather than profits. Ultimately, the power to demand better lies with the public. By supporting ethical journalism, questioning narratives, and advocating for transparency, we can reshape the media landscape. The press is a cornerstone of democracy, but it's our collective responsibility to ensure it fulfills its promise. The fight for truthful media is far from over. As we navigate an era of misinformation and polarization, we must champion those who seek to inform rather than manipulate. The road ahead demands courage, collaboration, and an unwavering commitment to the truth. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the lessons of the past and present can guide us toward a future where media serves as a true pillar of democracy. Together, we can ensure that the Fourth Estate remains a force for good. Media has always been a mirror of society, a lens through which we understand our world. But as we've seen, this mirror can distort as easily as it can reflect. From the printing presses of the 18th century to the algorithms of the digital age, media has wielded immense power to inform, inspire, and manipulate. The dual nature of media, its ability to enlighten and deceive, remains a critical challenge. With great power comes great responsibility. Yet history has shown us that unchecked media often prioritizes profit, influence, or political agendas over the public good. So, where do we go from here? Ethical journalism is the cornerstone of democracy. When reporters pursue the truth, even in the face of immense pressure, they hold power accountable and give voice to the voiceless. From Watergate to modern whistleblower revelations, these stories remind us of the critical role journalism plays in preserving freedom. Independent journalism, free from corporate influence, has become a beacon of hope in an increasingly polarized media landscape. By prioritizing integrity over profit, these platforms prove that the pursuit of truth can still thrive. As we close this chapter, it is critical to remember, the media should not shape our world. It should not be the propaganda arm of politicians or special interest groups. Irresponsible media outlets have earned the title fake news. Let us not forget that today's media is entertainment-driven, based on sensationalism to generate ad revenue. Let us demand integrity from our media outlets, support those who seek the truth, and remain vigilant in our quest for accountability. It is healthy to be skeptical until the day the media restores its credibility in the eyes of the viewers. Together, we can ensure that media remains a force for good, guiding us toward a brighter, more informed future. Thank you for joining the Time Traveler on this journey through the history of media corruption and the fight for accountability. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can uncover the truth behind the headlines and ensure that the Fourth Estate remains a cornerstone of democracy.